Free will is a question that has preoccupied philosophers for centuries. Searching for the answer of whether or not humans have free will, or if we are programmed, in a sense, to act out in a deterministic fashion. When we add the modern physics to the equation, we get more determinism, a model that deals with the physical makeup of the universe and its inherent properties. And it all points to not having free will. Yet religion says the opposite, sort of. In Christianity, it is wholly reliant on humans having free will, so that their punishments for sin in the afterlife is a reasonable conclusion. However, it also teaches you to abandon free will in order to gain access to heaven. But many of us don't like the answer that we don't have free will, that we don't make our own decisions, and everything is already written and determined. But is it true?
What the particles do is described by the mathematics of the Standard Model. It's a lot of maths, and you need that maths if you want to answer difficult questions, like what's going on in LHC collisions. For simple questions, like whether free will exists, we don't need to know much about the maths. Relevant is just that ultimately what you and I do is also described by the Standard Model. And yes, that means that we know the equations for human behavior. We can write them down. In practice, that's a completely useless statement because we can't solve the equations for all these 10 to the 30 or so particles that humans are made of. Not even the biggest supercomputer in the world could do that. But we don't need to solve the equations to draw conclusions from their properties. For the purposes of this video, the most relevant property of these equations is that they are deterministic, which means that if you know the properties and motions of the particles at one time, you can calculate what happens at any later time.
Dr. Hossenfelde displays here what irritates me the most about a lot of physicists and determinism. Arrogance and a sense of superiority. She even often says things like, things are nonsense. In her video about her not believing in free will, and I'll link to her video down below, she goes into a fairly lengthy explanation about how the universe is made up of particles, and these particles create a waveform that makes up the universe. And within this framework, quantum mechanics sometimes kicks in and gives a bit of randomness.
Plus random jumps. In quantum mechanics, we use wave functions to describe the particles, and this implies that there are some quantities, like position and momentum, whose values you can't know precisely at the same time. But the wave function still changes deterministically. If you want, you can include gravity, but that's just a deterministic theory, a non-quantum theory or a classical theory, as physicists say. So gravity just adds some more determinism on top. And that's how the universe works, for all we currently know. It's one big wave function that contains all those particles. Its change in time is deterministic with the occasional random jump. The deterministic part is fixed by the past. The random jumps cannot be influenced by anything because that's what it means for them to be random.
As seen here, she goes on to describe how quantum mechanics can go one of two ways, and that some physicists conclude that atoms can be observers, and that if so, that reality doesn't really exist. Hossenfelde, of course, leans on the physical as the only manifestation in reality, so she disagrees with this conclusion or theory. The idea is that if humans have free will, then elemental particles also have free will, and this, of course, seems silly to her, and possibly to most people. It leaves the question of what free will is. Most of us assume it's about decision-making, that you can take one of two paths, or one of two decisions. It's actually more, but we'll stay with two for the sake of brevity. And that isn't determined which way you'll go, and you make that decision. The determinist point of view is that you are merely following what a predictive model would be able to write for you, and you act accordingly, to and from what you were in the past, to act in accordance with whatever momentum and direction you are heading in, or for lack of better wording, programmed to do. The process is a purely mechanical one, and one that you really have no control over. But Those pesky thoughts in your head, those thoughts that always seem like an afterthought, a non sequitur, an irrelevant thing, tells you that you do have a choice and that you could have went left when you really went right. And some may say, this seems right, this seems like the correct explanation, and maybe we only think we have free will and we actually don't. Well, others are going to reject it outright because it removes all meaning from existence. If we do not have free will, if we do not have a purpose or control over our own lives, then there is no meaning. Even for others, it would be a relief to take the responsibility away, for how can we punish anyone if everything is determined, and you don't actually have a choice in what actions you take? Here we see a fundamental roadblock in Hossenfelder's and other determinists' thinking, that if, as it seems that human thought or consciousness and free will exists outside the physical world, then it can't possibly be relevant to the physical world, so, as in her words, why bother thinking about it? And I have to laugh. I want to say in her own arrogant words, this is nonsense. For one, thoughts and decisions do have an effect on the physical world. For everything that humans manipulate in the physical world transmutes and changes things in the physical world. And this always begins as a thought, an idea, an inspiration. So just right there we can prove that if thought and consciousness exist on a different plane than the physical, then it still interacts with the physical and can make changes. To go back to the free will argument, I will take a standpoint that maybe some of you watching might be surprised, because I agree with her. People in general do not possess free will, including her. Most people do walk around in their daily lives on autopilot, fulfilling a programming that was provided by others in society, a program that lets you live your life and you sort of go with the punches. The successes seem lucky, and the bad times seem like you've got some bad karma. Oh well, life goes on, just pick yourself up and keep doing the same thing. Now, that being said, there is what I call the existence of free will available to everyone, and that this free will is only available to you when you learn to deprogram yourself from others' influence, and learn to program your own subconscious self. You can learn to train your own subconsciousness on a new program, one where you have set intentions based on what you need and want, and you can activate your free will to change your reality. If one awakens themselves to the concept that all of reality may be shaped by thought, created by thought, and manipulated by thought, then this realization and ability to exhibit your free will becomes increasingly more and more powerful. The establishment of both society and religion, of course, do not want you to have access to this ability, and why they try and steer you away from such ideas and notions, either demonizing anyone trying to teach it or outright programming you through systems of power and habit that prevent you from seeing just how much power you actually have over your own life. Free will exists, but not everyone is using it. There is meaning in this world. To suggest that free will and thoughts are irrelevant to the physical world is both nonsensical, and it is also bordering on evil. In the Garden of Eden, it was not knowledge that humans gathered when biting the apple. It was the conscious mind that became a maze of thoughts and emotions, a brain so overwhelmed it could no longer have a direct two-way link with its own subconscious. Humans gained knowledge of one sorts, and it lost the knowledge of the more divine. And this was the expulsion from paradise. Okay, now it's time for you to tell me what you think. Let me know in the comments below. Do you think we have free will? Please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps out a small channel like this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.